These are the most controversial changes that the One Piece live action has made from the anime and manga. Changes between mediums are inevitable and sometimes end up being quite controversial. The first controversial change is the death of the King of Pirates, Gold Deed Roger. We actually see it happening. To start off with the effects of this change, it immediately sets the tone for the live action. It tells us that this is not the series we know and that it's going to go in its own direction while remaining mostly true to the original story. Roger is a character greater than life. His presence is always felt in One Piece, and even 20 years after his death, the legacy of the Pirate King is what has shaped the world we see today. Roger's execution has been depicted on a bright sunny day as well as a breezy rainy day. It's sort of like listening to the stories of how Joker got his scar. How did the Pirate King die? And second on the list, there are a few missing characters in the live action, but the one you will see mostly called out is Hachi. Hachi is an octopus fisherman and an officer of the Arlong Pirates, and during the Arlong Park arc, he serves the very important role of being defeated by Zoro. Now, as much as it pains me, I cannot blame the live action for not including him because the fisherman look is already a challenge, and trying to make one work with 6 arms using 6 sword style would be a nightmare.
Good point.
The showrunner later on went on to explain exactly why Hachi needed to be cut.
There's always more that we wanted to do. For example, the character of Hachi. Boy, did I want Hachi in the show. And we had a whole fight between Hachi and Zoro. I couldn't do it. And that's no one's fault. It's just a matter of time and money.
Hachi is actually the most important part of Arlong Pirates because later on he becomes a part of a major decision taken by Luffy which involves some faces and punches. So who are they going to replace him with when that happens? Another big alteration is how Luffy eats his devil fruit, and it's an interesting change, but it doesn't work. Originally in the manga, Luffy is established as a foodie. He's a very energetic little boy man who is always hungry and will eat anything. So in the anime, Luffy was just hungry and had run out of food. And then he found this weird fruit in his chest, who he obviously decided to eat. But we understood from the scene that his only motivation for eating that was his hunger. But the idea behind eating it in the live action was clearly out there. Luffy thought that this was Shanks' most precious treasure, and by eating it, he thought he'll become the most precious treasure. Yeah, I know the logic isn't amazing, but he's a child. It doesn't have to be amazing. This change is still a little less controversial. Now this alteration is a really big one. Probably the single greatest change in the show, which is the Battle of Baratie. Or I guess not, as it did not happen. I think Don Krieg was the main antagonist of the entire Baratie. After being chased out of Grand Line by Mihawk, Don Krieg arrived at the restaurant and decided that he's going to commandeer the floating vessel and add it to his fleet. And this is how Luffy originally got out of being a dishwasher. He made a deal with Zeff to defeat Don Krieg, and then his year long of service would be pardoned, which I think is not explained in the live action. Don Krieg was actually the most powerful pirate in the East Blue, so he essentially brought a small army to Baratie. It was probably the largest scale conflict of the East Blue, but I think that's why it had to be cut. I think filming this whole battle would have been shockingly expensive, but quite frankly, I think Don Krieg is the one character fans would be okay cutting, but it's less about him and more about impact of his decisions on those around him. And another thing, battles are primarily the places where characters develop. It's where they learn things about themselves and others. But what the One Piece live action had to do out of necessity was cut out most of the battles, which means the live action had to find another ways to actually develop the characters. This whole thing is displayed in a quick fight, and I don't think it did anything for Sanji to make him want to join Luffy, which actually happened in the anime. I know it works well enough for a first time viewer, but as someone who knows the series, I find Baratie pretty unsatisfying as a whole. Another thing on the list is the Syrup Village invasion. In the anime there are a few scenes in the mansions, but in the anime most of the story plays out on the coast of the island where the Straw Hats were actually fighting all of the Black Cat pirates. But in the live action we only saw Captain Kuro and 2 others, when there was supposed to be a whole crew of people invading the village, and the person who actually made Usopp grow was missing. In the anime, Django is the vice captain of the Black Cat Pirates, so while the Straw Hats were busy with Captain Kuro and his crew, it actually falls to Usopp to go and save Kai, which is a massive moment for him because he overcomes his cowardice and actually succeeds when it mattered the most. And again, I know why the changes were made. The most wild game changer is that you were not supposed to know that Garp is Luffy's grandfather. What they actually did was take a piece from the Grand 7 saga and put it in front of you, where Garp did pursue the crew and threw cannonballs at them, etc. He even meets them on the island and does the big info dump, so it's not completely unfamiliar, but it does feel out of place. And as a character, Garp is probably the one who departs most from his manga self in the live action. He's much more similar to Luffy in fact. He wasn't even going to chase after Luffy at all. He got ordered to, and even then, he purposely gave a half-assed effort in the anime. For a first-time viewer, there won't be any inherent problem in Garp at all. At least the first-time viewers got a good twist at the end of the show. But it's worth noting that Oda initially had reservations about the storyline, and in hindsight, it might have been best to try some other approaches for the storyline. Although the concept itself seems solid to me, its implementation stands out as the weakest part of the live-action adaptation. And most importantly, you let me know in the comments, what do you think was the most controversial change in the live-action adaptation of One Piece? And see you soon.